Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We're going to get started in just a second, but I just want to give some time for everybody to join us. Hold on, let me fix it so you guys can't see everything. Aha, now it's the stars. Yeah, so we'll get started in just 1 second. I'm Emma Valinsky-Lloyd. I am the Director of Policy and Programs for the Executives for Health Innovation. Today's webinar, Overcoming Barriers, Capturing Clinical Data Using the Cloud. While we wait for everybody to roll in, I would like to hear where everybody's joining in from. I think that's nice to see where our group is. I'm in lovely Arlington, Virginia. It's humid and nice. Where are you guys joining in from? And Mitch. Oh, yay. Okay. Rhode Island. Anybody from New Hampshire? Because I always have to ask, because I'm from New Hampshire originally, and I just want to see. We have Georgia and Maryland and Canada. Ooh, look at them all. Massachusetts, close. All right, awesome. Used to live in New Hampshire. I'll take it. Okay. We'll get started today. I just want to go over a quick, well, anyway, I want to introduce myself again for all of you joining. I am Emma Valinsky-Lloyd. I am the Program Director for Executives for Health Innovation, and I'm excited to get started with our webinar today, Overcoming Barriers, Capturing Clinical Data Using the Cloud. Today's sponsor, Redox, along with Sage Growth Partners, has done some really incredible research trying to understand the challenges of connecting data from EHRs and other legacy devices to the cloud. And so we're going to dive into some of the top findings today with some fantastic experts. Before we get started, we want to hear all of your comments, all of your thoughts. And if you have resources that you want everybody else to hear about, we would love that. You can just put them in the chat box. If you have any questions for the speakers, you can put that in the Q&A box, and that'll just be easier for me to find them when we do an audience Q&A at the end. We will have 2 polling questions, so you be on the lookout for that so that we can hear from you. And the webinar is recorded, and all the slides will be sent out afterwards, along with the recording, and the report with Redox and Sage Growth Partners will be sent out next week, and you guys will all get that as well. So if you're new here, we are EHI. We're a nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C. We convene experts and executives from all across the health IT ecosystem. We bring these diverse leaders together, and we collaborate for innovative solutions. We do that through collaborative learning, which is like roundtables, briefings, the webinar that you're on today, shaping policy through education, and thought leadership, which is our membership and all of our networking events. And you'll see that we are a multi-stakeholder community, our membership. And so if you see your name on this list, know that you and your team are also members. And so we'd love to get you involved. And if you don't see your name on the list and you would like to get involved, which I'm sure you do, you can put that also in the chat box, and I'll get back to you. There we go. And so on the note of collaborative learning, if you want more information about topics like this or just anything, we have our resource center, and you can also find the slides going forward about this from this webinar as well there. And then a big, giant, huge thank you again to Redox for sponsoring today's webinar. Without our members and with their teams, we wouldn't be able to do all of this really amazing work. So I really do appreciate it. We all appreciate it. And just another minute before we jump into the discussion, I just want to level set for everybody. We all know that adoption of cloud and cloud-enabled tech is growing. And so the webinar, like it says, is a sneak peek into all the findings that Redox and Sage Growth Partners have discovered when they were interviewing innovation and strategy executives in all different types of provider organizations. And I won't read through all of this, but it really just goes to show how robust the survey was, right? They're really trying to get an understanding of how the cloud is being used through the survey, the impacts, the challenges of the implementation, and the solution. And lucky us, we get some fantastic experts in their field to go to look at the findings, tell us what they're thinking, and we'll be able to hear about their experiences as well. So on that, if you have any comments along the way, don't forget to put them in the chat. And finally, I get to introduce our speakers. So we have James Buntrock, Vice Chair, Information Technology at Mayo Clinic, Mitch Kiwakowski, Chief Data Analytics Officer at Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Anand Sokar, Head Omnichannel Consumer Analytics Enterprise Platform at Wellstar. So if you guys could just quickly introduce yourself, tell us what kind of perspective you're bringing today. James, you can start.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. This is Jim Buntrock from Mayo Clinic. As Emma said, I'm the vice chair in our IT group. I lead up an area called Enterprise Technology Services, which covers our enterprise platforms around data, API integration, identity management. But I also run our digital platforms and digital experience through our websites, as well as our consumer applications. We've been on a cloud journey here for the last 3 years, and that's the perspective I've been bringing, both with data and AI as part of that journey.
Great. Hi, my name is Mitch Kwiatkowski. I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Marshfield Clinic Health System. The perspective that I'm bringing as a rural healthcare system across the state of Wisconsin. We have about 350,000 patients, 11 hospitals, 65 clinics. We also have a health plan across the state with over 200,000 members, and we've got a research institute. So from my perspective, I look at different parts of the business. Obviously, we're talking today about clinical data, but there are a lot of different things to bring together, and cloud's been a very important part of that journey and will continue to be so over the next few years.
Hi, this is Anand Sokar here, Head of Omnichannel and Enterprise Data Platform at Wellstar Health System. The perspective I bring in is how do we break down the silos across physical and digital systems that currently exist in healthcare domain. And Wellstar Health System has acquired around 15 hospitals and around 400 facilities, and we have 6 million plus patients that we cater to in the state of Georgia. We are a non-profit organization, and we had to ensure, thanks to the pandemic, bring the digital channels also into the fray to ensure we give a 360-degree view for providers and patients. That's the perspective I bring today. Thank you.
So you can see why we're so lucky to have them all here today, right? So let's jump into the report's findings. This first one here, the finding, the cloud is making an impact now, but there are bigger expectations for the future, right? You can see towards the bottom of this graph that the executives are expecting to see a jump in product innovation, customer engagement, and improved diagnosis and or treatment. So for my panelists, I was wondering, looking at this data, does it kind of look like what you're seeing at your organization?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things when we initiated this capability enablement, the review process that we had to go through was starting with security team approval, compliance, ITSec, InfoSec, application security team. So security becomes extremely primary and key for enabling omni capability for a healthcare provider. This itself is fairly new to the domain, but thanks to pandemic, we had to accelerate this. That was one. Obviously, the other items were accelerate product innovation, because patients are becoming less patients with their expectations from the provider, and also they expect shortened timelines in terms of innovation, even including providers and practitioners internally within Wellstar. So very, very well, articulated, impacts out here that I can relate to on the ground in Wellstar. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree from Marshfield's perspective. Certainly, the improved capabilities around security have been important. As we start to pivot now on our journey, and we think more about digital and innovation through that way, better engagement, addressing particularly in our space in rural healthcare, some of the access challenges and other social risk factors that are huge. The cloud's going to give us opportunities with capabilities that we might not have had on-prem, and at a better, it's not necessarily cheaper overall when you look at doing cloud versus on-prem, or at least initially. But when you think about the fact that you can try new things, you can innovate, and you're not having to invest in huge infrastructure to do that, with the potential risk that that infrastructure doesn't get used if something, if you want to go through the fail fast mentality. So certainly been able to be much more agile, and again, I think the ones that are highlighted at the bottom in terms of future impact are really big factors for us.
The only comment I will add that's really not fully listed here is really the ability to scale. So Mayo Clinic has invested in data warehousing since around 2005 timeline, and we've made incremental improvements to our data platform on premise. And at the peak of that, we were managing between 2 and 3 petabytes of data. With the cloud work that we've been doing with Google Cloud, we're up to 30 petabyte of data. It's including multimodal data, which is predominantly driven through imaging, digital pathology, but also new types of waveforms that historically we haven't been able to manage at scale. So it's giving us a base opportunity that we just couldn't do before, that drives some of these things on this list, like enhanced product innovation, improved diagnosis and treatment, and really the ability to do things you couldn't physically do just on-prem.
And so thinking about all of that, let's jump 2 years into the future. Do you expect any big changes? Like, are you expecting different types of challenges there?
Well, I can start on this set of questions. For us, that reduced cost is one that we're keeping a close eye on. So, there's the new term is kind of cloud smart. So you have to go in with your eyes wide open. It requires a different set of disciplines to manage costs. The concept around called FinOps, and FinOps is basically because the volume of the different charges that cloud collects is so high that you have to have new management techniques to manage costs, understand capacity, understand optimization. So it's one that we're definitely paying attention to, and I think that will continue to be a point that we'll be emphasizing over the next 2 years. Where we see with this foundation in place, what we do see is more innovation, as well as new types of digital tools. So we recently refactored our patient application, both our mobile and web portal. That's for the first time now running on a footprint on the Google Cloud. That's giving us now a base to do more rapid innovation or changes. The second is around AI. So AI, I know it's a topic by itself, but Mayo being an academic medical center, we have a number of our ologies investing in data science to look for AI methods that could improve things around administrative burden to better prognostics or diagnostics. As you get towards more of the care end, of course, there is a lot of FDA regulations that we have to be aware of, but we see that front end pipeline being much more voluminous to get to an output that can be applied back to the patient.
Yeah, and I think we have similar goals and interests. I think the other piece of this is an opportunity for us to take our different systems and find ways to tie them all together, stitch them all together. So I think getting back even very foundational and ensuring that we've got an optimal, I'd say trying to future-proof as much as possible architecture. Not everything necessarily has to be cloud, but it's using cloud maybe as a backbone of that framework. And ensuring that we're able to move data quickly, freely as needed, that it's secured, the appropriate access, and that we're enabling, a variety of different use cases, things we know about today, as well as things that we don't know about. But certainly very, very much the innovation piece, but as interoperability requirements expand, as patients and members want to engage more with providers or care teams, it's going to be important for us to be able to ensure that even just the day-to-day data management functions, they're well governed, but again, leveraging what we can out of cloud to take advantage and scale up, scale down, and out as needed.
Yeah, to add to that, our journey started off around 18 months on the cloud, and costs are definitely a factor. And we will start seeing those impacts in a year or so. But more importantly, we are looking at improved diagnosis and treatment mechanisms, looking at a patient from a 360-degree view perspective in the next 18 months to 36 months. So those will be the innovation areas that we will be looking at. But otherwise, we are rapidly progressing on product innovation, delivery innovation, and of course, the shorter project timelines. Yeah.
And so thinking about those impacts, what kind so the respondents were asked, how are you using the cloud now, and how do you plan to use it in the future? And I believe Brian is going to push a similar polling question to you guys in the audience that we can look at. But the finding being there is a big rise in treatment and diagnosis use cases in the future. And you can see at the bottom here, right, 34% to 53%. So to my panelists, yeah, reflecting on your own experiences, what do you think about this kind of finding?
So I'll jump in here. I think I would agree with a lot of these. I think what we've a lot of our experience cloud up to this point, and again, it's been a very, I'd say a pragmatic approach, and it's not necessarily jumping all in 2 feet at the same time. We've started with some very, I'd say, baseline use cases that we've had, more I'd say data warehouse type things, which have worked really, really well for us and have allowed us to deliver things pretty quickly, particularly on our health plan side. For us, I see a lot more patient engagement, which I think is indicative of these results here. I think that digital engagement, as I mentioned before, access for our populations, helping with some of the other health equity topics, and leveraging cloud to take a variety of different data, not just clinical, but when we start to talk other things, that social determinants of health and so on, and being able to really get that complete picture of patients, I think is going to be huge. And again, leveraging the scale and the capabilities that it's got are going to be are really good. And I'd say the other one on here that jumps out for us is research. I think it's going to really open up a lot on the research side that again, we've done well, but generally have not yet taken advantage of what the cloud's going to be able to offer for that space.
Yeah, in our case, yeah, thank you. In our case, we started off our journey with patient engagement solutions. So we looked at first who is entering our physical or digital assets interfaces, right? So patients and providers, what is the interface looking like? What is their experience looking like? And then we are moving towards the operation side of things. This doesn't mean that operations is not focused, definitely a core focus area of ours, but just this cloud journey has started off looking outside in from a patient and provider centric perspective.
Yeah. And so, I mean, James, you can answer, or I can just ask you, like, what are you expecting to see in the future? Again, 2 years, I'll say 2 years, 3 years. What are you expecting?
Yeah, I was gonna answer with sort of an anchor point. So as part of our cloud as a sort of a foundational layer, we're gonna probably drive 2 main things. One is on this product application development. And some of these apps are direct to consumer, direct to patient. Some might be more internal workflow. But that as an anchor point will naturally improve some of the patient engagement options. We're going to be doing more patient remote monitoring. It could improve some of the core operations and workflow. So it's sort of how do the product or apps start to drive these other factors. The second big anchor, it really is around kind of that clinical research or discovery. So how we're using the cloud to be a base of innovation, access to data, access to large scale data to support the different research protocols. It could be everything from trial feasibility to I want to create a new algorithm, based on treatment and conditions. And that's another engine we see going, and that has a longer runway. In some cases, that does end up improving health, or it does improve the patient engagement, but it's more of a core investment area that we see growth in.
Awesome. I'm trying to see how to pull up the results just so we can quickly comment on that. Brian, looks like here we go. Is everyone able to see the results? Cool. So yeah, I see here like kind of where we were thinking clinical research being at 0%. That's interesting to me. And then treatment and diagnosis not being quite as high as their research. So yeah. All right. Sorry. All right. And so back to the title of today's webinar, right? Clinical data is a necessity, but there are certainly some major challenges to enabling it. You see here, 97% of executives found ingesting real-time clinical data to be somewhat or very necessary. And then you have that 3% over there that might be small, but it's a really intense statement, right? Do not expect to encounter any challenges or anything in the future. What do you think of that 97 and that 3%? But I'm certainly curious about the 3% too.
I can give a start out since I mentioned we have 30 petabytes on the cloud. Real-time data. So real-time is always an interesting definition. So I'd like to use more transaction speed. So within 1 or 2 seconds of when that event was generated, do we have that data ready for access and consumability? So even when we were on premise, we did focus quite a bit on some of the real-time uses, whether it's physiological monitoring or just event speed coming off our EMR. That is definitely necessary to support a number of the use cases. When I talk about some of the new kinds of apps that we're building, either for the end patient or even for the internal workforce, it does by very nature require more of that real-time data. The second thing, when you get into support of clinical decision support methods, that also can demand real-time data. As far as do not expect challenges, there's a very similar paradigm with the cloud. Is any kind of data handling is fraught with challenges. So we have encountered challenges. Sometimes they're not necessarily purely technical. It could be the complexity of how do we move petabyte of data up to the cloud safely and securely, and then how do you continue to hydrate that at a pace? So things like interconnect speeds, how you might move data for some types of data types is important to understand. The other aspect is, we know medical data or healthcare data is complex, and that continues to also be a general challenge as you look at how do I take what I call more native or raw data, but map it to, say, a data standard like FHIR, and how to do that at a level of confidence and trustability. So those continue to be challenges. So I would disagree that that should probably be 0. There's going to be challenges ingesting data.
So for us, Wellstar Keystone Hospital is one of the busiest hospital for trauma care in entire North America. So we have as many ambulances going in and out, up to around 180 of them in a day. So it's extremely busy, but it also means so much of data is generated, and the sense of urgency from a technology is a must, right? There's no compromise we can make on it. So I'll give an example. Let's consider a mom who had a preemie baby who's just out of the NICU. How do we ensure when she's coming into the hospital, she gets all the appointments lined up, whether it's cardio, pediatric, neuro, everyone that she needs to ensure is all lined up? If we do not have a real-time data about the whereabouts of the baby and the mom, it's very hard to notify the practitioner, providers, everyone in the hospital system that, hey, such a patient is coming in and we need to act with urgency because the mom is concerned and we just got notified half an hour back when she left her home, right? So real-time data is extremely important in a healthcare setup, and it could even be fatal. That's why we are there for what we are, right? We are there for caring of our patients. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with all those comments. And I think when you're looking at things, leveraging medical devices, you might be doing, prediction of hospital-acquired infections, or there may be event-driven decision-making or augmentation of decision-making. I think those are going to be really important. I think we have to be clear about what real-time means. Is it near real-time? Is it, within seconds, sub-seconds, et cetera? But I would, as I look at this, it's not clear if it's a provider organization. Maybe they just haven't gotten there yet. I think just about any organization outside of maybe some smaller types of clinics may have a harder time finding some of those use cases, but certainly in the acute setting, there are a number of those. I think on the challenges with ingesting data, I have a little bit of maybe of a different perspective. I don't necessarily see challenges ingesting the data or getting data to the cloud. I look at it more as how are we accessing the data? Where is the data, right? So I think I mentioned before, we aren't necessarily thinking we've got to go and load all of our data into the cloud. We may leave somewhere it's at when it's appropriate. So now it becomes a question of how do we orchestrate and connect and stitch that data together, whether it's through event-driven technologies, PubSub technologies, API management solutions, and so on. So I think that's those are the architectural decisions we've got to make. But once it gets to a point of getting data to the cloud, I sort of look at it as, well, it's just a data center that's someplace else. The element of, the challenges of getting it there, maybe volume in some cases would be that, or can it keep up with the velocity of, but I think in most of those cases that, that ability to keep up with those is there. So again, I might just have a slightly, different perspective on that one.
Perfect. We love different perspectives. And so thinking of challenges, we'll move on. So a different type of challenges. So they were asked, what makes enabling real-time clinical data so hard? And we were just discussing that. But I was wondering what your thoughts were on these big three, human, financial, and technical capital being the top challenges. And specifically, is human capital the biggest challenge for you? Oh, wait, I don't want to forget that we have a poll for you guys. I don't know if Brian can push it. So we want to ask you guys the same questions too. So then now you can go.
Well, I can start, Emma, while people vote here. I look at the percentages here, they're all kind of within the bell curve. I think all three are factors, in our experience at Mayo. Obviously, there's two types of human capital. One is when we first started our cloud journey, getting people up to speed and trained. I think when we started our Google journey, we had like 6 people that had any kind of Google Cloud experience. So that definitely takes time and investment on your workforce. Combination of upskilling and training, but also recruiting a net new experience. And I think that's not an overnight process. So that does take time to build up. So that is I'll call it a cloud technology constraint. And then if you layer in hey, do you not only know cloud technologies, but do you really know about clinical data, and do you know the content well? And so as long as I've been doing enterprise data warehousing, understanding data to do ETL, to do mapping, to do semantic normalization is always a challenge. And so getting people with the right skill to be able to analyze, make those changes is part of that human capital limitation. So those are my kind of quick reviews. The financial capital is data is expensive to use to work with. And so don't underestimate the size of that foundational investment. But the return is not just in necessarily a year or two. The return is over multi-year or a decade or longer of what you're doing. We formalized sort of our first larger data investments in the early 2000s. So I mentioned 2005 was our start of our enterprise data warehousing, but we've incrementally added and it allowed us to kind of jump into the cloud faster because we had done a lot of data organization, a lot of data investment prior to that starting point.
I'll start off where James left off. For us, data is more like a soil. We need to enrich them. We will find good nutrients and gems so that they will provide us the insights necessary to bring operational efficiencies and top line growth as well. Having said that, is it possible with in-house capital, like whether it's human or technical? Absolutely not, just because we are looking at patients and providers. That's our primary core business. As a result, we need to make sure we dip into the right aspects of where we need to invest, where we need to seek help. So in that sense, mapping legacy standards to FHIR, so Redox was our choice. When it comes to technical challenges, yes, we had to make sure that the delivery component of it, the architecture component of it is in-house, but we had to seek the integration aspects, resources from system integrators to help us prop those teams. On the financial aspect, without the leadership, including the C-suite commitment, the cloud transformation is very hard to pull off, including data and analytics space. So Wellstar recognized this early on, and also thanks to the pandemic, there was an inflection point. We just accelerated our focus to bring data analytics and the omni capabilities all together on a singular investment space. As a result, this has helped us move fast. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, the piece on, I would agree with expertise on FHIR has been a challenge for years. I've seen this at other organizations as well, and you can build up that expertise. But there's still a lot that's there, and Marshfield in particular, we spent the last couple of years transitioning away from an EHR system that was homegrown that we had built going back into the 80s, taking that data and converting into really an off-the-shelf EHR system in Cerner. And what we do largely is rely for the core, the 21st Century Cures Act requirements around FHIR. We rely on the certified EHR technology. Now, Cerner's still not the only EHR we've got. We have other EHR systems at a couple of our hospitals, but our health plan side, we've had to meet the Cures Act requirements there using a separate product that had translators, fortunately. So that's a piece that's certainly helpful to be able to take it into a sort of a standard format that gets ingested by these translators or transformers and put into FHIR. But as we look ahead and we think about the Cures Act requirements that will be coming, or the reality is that that we want to expand into FHIR more than we are today. We do want to build on that expertise, but also leverage tools, and cloud providers are catching up. The cloud, the big cloud providers have healthcare engines now that can do some of this work, and that's certainly helpful. From a financial piece, the one thing that I'll say on there that I think is really important, and with any data initiative or analytic initiative, and that's demonstrating value and that's demonstrating return. And I think the more that an organization can do that, if you can iterate over initiatives, you can show value and quantify that value, it becomes a little bit easier to start to get the budget and the funding. But to Jim's point, they're not necessarily cheap. These are things that do require investments. Sometimes they require investments over a period of time. So you do have you still want to show that incremental value, but that it still can have its challenges. You're competing for resources just like any other initiative in the organization. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think everyone in the audience is also kind of seeing the same thing going by what we're getting. But I also want to know, the person who wrote other, I want you to put it in the comments because I'm very curious. I added that just because I'd like to know. But just on to, before I jump into our last slide, I want to remind everybody in the audience that we do want to hear from you. We want your questions. Thank you to everybody who's already sent them in. Keep them coming, and we will get to that in just a bit. So if we're looking at one of the major insights from this report is that cloud data projects are often slow and expensive, which is impacting cloud investment time to value. Before we jump into our audience questions, what do you think of these findings? Is that kind of what you're experiencing yourself?
Absolutely right. It depends on what is the use case you're going with. And also it depends on whether business-led transformation or technology team-led transformation. So it's a function, the timeline perspective, it's a function of whether business is driving, technology team is driving, and will that suffice? Because when you are talking about cloud, you enable just for one use case, or are you looking at pulling a data lake and a cloud-based data warehouse, and then enrich that data warehouse for multiple use cases so that multiple businesses can come in and seek insights, right? So that is one part of it. The other part of it is definitely this cannot be done by just one in-house technology team, just because of nature of change that is happening in the technology space. In the last 6 months, we are seeing a rise of AI use cases thanks to ChatGPT. So cloud has been, healthcare has been late in adopting cloud and getting the data onto the cloud platform. But combining these two, things that are coming across the healthcare domain, it has forced everyone to work with speed. As a result, looking at system integrators, looking at technical experts from niche product organizations like Fire has been very key. And definitely that helps accelerate and supercharge our innovations. And that's what has occurred at Wellstar.
Yeah, and I think certainly a lot of these, I'll even say programs are 6+ months, overall, and it says here, some of those are longer than a year. But I think going back to what I said before, we have to think about, I'm a big fan of trying to figure out how do we deliver incrementally, right? And how do we get more agile and not, hey, we're going to start this project 6 months from now, we're going to come back with something and hopefully it meets what you needed at that point after you've already forgotten that you even requested the project. I think we've got to deliver on a regular basis, and again, demonstrate that value so that it's not, maybe you have to wait a few weeks, maybe it's a month before you see something and you see something else in 2 and so on. But it's almost that product mindset. And you think about it, you hear a lot now about data products. And I think this is a great example of one of those. Is how do you build for, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 use cases, but consider the fact that you can meet a whole lot of other use cases and you treat it like a product, you enhance it, it has a life cycle and so on. The other, and cost is always going to be a factor in there. But the other piece I'd say on the integrator, I'm a fan of accelerating where you can. You get a jump up front, you get that built out. But I also like to make sure that we're not necessarily relying on that forever, that we're training people, we're building that subject matter expertise, that domain knowledge within our data engineering team, and analysts and whoever's involved in that, and being able to make sure that we can sustain that and build off of that as needed. But I think in a lot of cases, at least an accelerator to get jump started is often very, very helpful.
Yeah, in our experience is definitely these are all very true statements. For us, we started our cloud journey in September 2019. As many of you know, 6 months later, COVID hit. And so if you looked at kind of our data migration curve, we were fairly dormant for the first 18 months, and then we started to really start to move. For us, we had been doing FHIR as an organization. We wrote a lot of FHIR facades to different types of data stores. So we focused on an integrator to help more with the plumbing, so a data movement, data migration, the cloud technologies. And we use sort of our expertise around the FHIR mapping because one, we really knew our legacy data. We had 3 different EMRs. We went to one with Epic, but our institutional knowledge of legacy data, as well as some familiarity with the FHIR standard, we were in a better position. I think it's an area that is of concern if you haven't done either. If you haven't done much of a data project, let alone FHIR, this is probably your hotspot for doing any kind of investment.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for sending in questions. I just want to quickly reiterate that the full report will be sent out to all of you guys for registering, in Redox, and Sage Growth Partners will send it out obviously as well. So let me stop sharing here. I just wanted to quickly clarify. I know that we got a few questions about how exactly Redox defined real-time clinical data, and I just want to make sure so basically they did not get super specific with survey respondents on what they referred to as real time, but rather they focused on differentiating at a high level and asked if they did batch or real-time ingestion. So just putting that out there for everybody. I'm going to start hopping into some audience questions. First we have here, can you please talk about best practices on doing data inventory for clinical trials, how to structure and organize data inventory, and maybe generally common obstacles that you're seeing?
Well, that's a big question. So I think one of the keys for us, and this is a transition that we're starting to make. So I would say what we've done in the past around inventory and that has been very manual. We have implemented a data catalog that we intend to leverage more for those for tracking inventories of data, the metadata that goes along with that, combining that with our honest data broker program to ensure that as we move things around de-identification and so on, that those are tied together. But everything will get tracked through there, including lineage and other key pieces of tagging and classification. But that's a work in progress for us right now to make that shift away from manual to automated.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit. There's a lot to this question. So if you look at the range from minimal risk to formal clinical trials, our focus in terms from a data lens is easy access, data liquidity to our institutionally driven data. So this helps pre-populate case report forms, it pre-populates certain kinds of patient data. Of course, all if it's under the right research protocol. So where we can save abstraction time, where we can save feasibility analysis, those have been kind of key pieces. And in that regard, the data catalog, as Mitch mentioned, is one of our investments, but that's been data cataloging more to institutional sourcing of data. So things from the EMR, allergies, meds, diagnosis, procedures, demographics are kind of those building blocks. I'm guessing we do also do some cataloging around our trials management, but I'm less close to that personally here at Mayo Clinic. But that's sort of from a top down how we think about data liquidity to not only support clinical scenarios, but support some of those research scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would like to add, and Mitch did touch upon this earlier, look at it from a data product perspective. It is very attractive to get a provider partner, right, a cloud partner or a data warehouse partner who will get you off the ground very quickly. But if the storage formats are proprietary, it becomes hard to get the talent from outside. So ensure your storage formats are as open source as possible. That is one. The other part is ensure you have a very good discipline on defining data products, because if you're not able to define data products from a user perspective, in this case, you are looking at clinical trials data users, then the format may be in a very different form than what it needs to scale for these use cases. That is the other part of it. The third part of it is obviously the NFRs. Ensure that you have a very solid discipline on NFR specifically for cloud and data platform. Those are three things that we took care very early on to make sure there are specific data stores, not just everyone sinking their teeth into the raw data zones. It will be very hard once that occurs. People will start creating virtual data warehouses, costs will zoom very quickly, and you will not have any control. So.
James, specifically, someone put it in the chat, so I just figured I'd bring it up real quick. That you indicated that Mayo has a data warehouse, and if you could differentiate that from a data lake, and does Mayo have a data lake as well? If not,
Yeah, so let me clarify. So I use the word data warehouse in the context of our overall data journey. So we started our data warehousing effort in 2005. We worked on a classic data warehousing approach, and we recognized some of its scaling concerns. That sort of evolved into our internal data platform that started introducing some of the data lake aspects, so replicating raw data, making raw data available, but then integrating more selectively different data sources into data marts. And we had two concepts of a generalized mart and a specialty mart. And the generalized marts really served the lion's share of the general purpose querying. So we've continued that concept into the Google paradigm. So again, the lake concept of how we land a source data at scale, some of it's batch, some of it's real time, and then making that data available through Fire or flattened Fire views and BigQuery, but also other BigQuery data structures. So data warehouse is sort of a starting point, but clearly even on-prem to the cloud, we've evolved that concept from the traditional thinking that it was 15 years ago.
awesome, thank you. This next one, what were some things that surprised you before diving into a cloud project? And if you thought that the expectations were similar to how the project actually went?
I mean, from my end, I mean, this is my fourth go around. My career started in Amazon, so I was already very savvy on the cloud front, and of course at other retail organizations like Macy's and Lowe's. So what surprised me from a healthcare domain perspective was how far behind healthcare domain is relative to these other industries of fintech and retail when it comes to cloud and cloud adoption, right? So when it comes to ingestion, when it comes to patterns, what you need to have in place, what kind of data stores you need to define, how you need to look for cloud, what use cases you should use cloud for. So those were really surprising to see. That was something of a surprise for me. The other part is obviously getting everyone internal to the organization, not just data literate, but also cloud literate. So those were some surprises for me, but that was my personal experience. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I go to past lives, I'd say the surprises or maybe lessons learned are the amount of upfront work that's really necessary before you get too deep into start putting things up into the cloud and doing your due diligence around are you how are you governing the decisions? Are you multi-cloud? How are you making decisions about what gets built there? Who does that? Making just good decisions around security and your general architecture. Thinking about those things up front so that you're not caught later where you've built something, but you've built it into a corner and you can't really scale it or do more with that. It's not reusable. It's, it maybe doesn't, it's something that you end up having to rebuild later. So I think it's being very careful about the planning. It's like any project. If you go back to the project management principles of PMI or others, what percentage of your time is really spent on that planning and upfront work versus the execution and so on. And I think that's very much the case. So that was a great lesson learned, and it's helped, both from the, I guess, the operational piece as well as the financial piece, and being able to manage that effectively.
Yeah, the two things that I would add, I completely agree with Mitch. Even though we had our eyes wide open, getting that foundation right is important. There's complexity. It requires multidisciplines, security, networking, system administration, and then not just getting the foundation set, but having the right governance along it. So in the industry speak, it's a cloud center of excellence that can really serve as an anchor of governance that really unifies decisions, and it affects everything from security policy and how it's permeated through the different projects to billing and how that permeates through. The second big lesson learned is the cloud changes the accounting methodology, and depending on your organization, they may or may not be ready for that. And so it all costs money, but in terms of how cloud, and we work with corporate finance, are treating cloud costs, it's a different accounting model. And some of our departmental users and consumers, it's been a challenge to understand both transparency of cloud costs, but also how do you incorporate that into the budget process, where in the past it's been completely a capital refresh that's been managed more centrally. So it's all money, but in terms of how it gets exposed, pay attention to that part of your journey.
Awesome. This is why we have all these guys on the panel, right? These fantastic experiences that we were able to hear about. I just wanted to step back to the idea of human capital and working with your workforces, because someone put in here, and I thought it was curious, what project management methodologies do you use for your integration teams?
Yeah, so at Wellstar, we use Agile, SAFe framework, 2-week sprints. We have a product team, we have a technology team that is delivery side, and then we have the architecture team, all three coming every day to the stand-ups. We have an ADO board, which is similar to Jira. We are on ADO board because the cloud data platform is on Azure. So we use Azure ecosystem of tools. So in that sense, our delivery is very transparent to business, and also the value realization is very clear. And we have a very clear roadmap because the business case is defined by business and technology teams combined. And that fits into the prioritization and in turn into our technology delivery cycle. Yeah.
For us, we started in a very classic program management fashion around large work streams. In the middle of that, we started to transfer into more of a scaled agile approach, and we are on our 7th program increment. It's been a learning journey, but from a scaled agile, it's really looking at multiple release trains, really planning that work in 3-month intervals, and then really committing to work that's going to be delivered in those intervals. So it follows kind of an agile scrum, but a scaled agile in the sense of SAFe methodology. So we're using a SAFe framework. So when in doubt, we trust the SAFe definitions. But I would say we're still on the early maturity of that journey using SAFe and scaled agile.
Yeah, I would say we're probably about the same in terms of viewing agile. We're trying to do as much as we can because it makes sense, again, delivering that incremental value. But the reality too is that we still get larger, more complex projects that require waterfall. So we'll still see our share of those. And typically that's when there's a heavy integration with other teams to deliver on an initiative. So whatever we can manage within our teams, we're trying to do that through product increments and sprints whenever possible. But again, it'll depend on the project. Ideally, I'd like to see us get more into agile and more formal, whether it's safe agile or something similar. But that's a part of the evolution that we'll go through on the journey.
Awesome. And sticking with the workforce vein for a second, someone wrote, it's generally believed that data cleaning takes as much as 80% of an analyst's time. Do you think cloud plays a role in reducing this percentage?
I'll take this first. So two things: if your data source is in the cloud, then and if you are the owner, you need to own up whether you are having clean data or otherwise. But if you are using cloud to source data from source systems that are on legacy or third-party vendors, then garbage in, garbage out. So 80% of analysts' time, yeah, it takes, it is what it is, but you need to address it at the source system level. If you start owning up in the cloud, if you are not the source system, if you start owning up the cleansing, your day will not end. The project's delivery will get delayed. So make sure accountability and ownership is with the data owners, who in turn are source system owners. Otherwise, it's only going to exponentially increase. Yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree. I'm a huge fan of data governance. And to me, it doesn't really matter where the data is located. It could be in the cloud, could be on a server under your desk. I think you're going to run into the same challenges. I guess I will say, I always love the number that gets thrown out, the percentage of time spent wrangling data. I would argue that I do believe in a lot of cases, as an analyst goes through, that data is never going to be perfect, for whatever their use case is. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's a data quality, a cleansing type of issue, but there may have to be some transformation. So I don't see that percentage ever going away completely. I think that's maybe a utopia for data scientists and so on. But I do think better governance practices, ownership by the business is critical, and engagement and involvement from the business is critical in helping to make decisions and having a good governance program to make sure that those decisions are put into practice. And that will certainly help with the cloud journey in any of the analysts' time.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mitch. There's times I feel like the analyst likes doing this. So you're right, it may never get down to 0%, but in all seriousness, I think one of the areas we've seen cloud, and this is a kind of a corner case, is that we've been able to do some interesting data quality checks at scale that we couldn't do on-prem before. So it's given us, I'll call it large corpora analytics and data quality measures that either weren't practical before, or we just didn't have the data scaling or tooling that we have on cloud. So that in turn would lead to data that needs maybe more trustworthy, that gives more confidence for the analysts using the data.
Awesome. And we're just coming up on time. So I'm sure everybody got a lot of information from this. I certainly did. But if anyone had just took one takeaway from each of you, what would that be? Your final thought?
Yeah, I mean, this is a transformation. If you are trying to get into cloud, you need to make sure stakeholders are fully committed. Do not assume it's just you and your team who can pull this off. Every stakeholder in the organization has a role to play. Get their buy-ins. That's one thing I definitely would say.
The couple of things I would add that I haven't stated is the cloud is here, it's real. Don't ignore it. So maybe 5 years ago, you could kind of ignore it. It's going to be part of your corporate strategy in one way or the other. I think the second is just really be thinking through the cost aspects in your journey. So good hygiene, good planning still matters. There's not necessarily anything magical, but if you don't do that right, you can not only have a bad cloud experience, you can have a large bill that you can't pay. Yeah,
I would second everything Jim said, and I would go back. If cloud's not part of your strategy, it needs to be. You need to find a way to do that. It will be a critical enabler to a lot of the other strategic needs that your organization has. But that upfront planning, the FinOps, those are going to be critical. And again, governance always is going to be a big factor. So I think the more that an organization can do that upfront, be transparent, open, get that buy-in from the business, I think you can be very successful.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to reiterate before we sign off today, thank you again to Redox and their work with Sage Growth Partners. We were able to really have a great conversation today. And the recording of this webinar, the slides, and the report are coming out to you guys soon. So thank you again. And thanks to our speakers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.